Imagine a queen draped in silk, her eyes glinting in the candlelight of a chamber that only few dared enter. Behind the thick stone walls of her castle, nights were filled not with prayers or politics, but with dangerous liaisons that would seal the fates of kings and entire realms. What happens when passion crosses into treason, when a single forbidden touch leads to rivers of blood? Stay with us, because this is the story of the Queen of Sins, and how her pleasures turned into a deadly game of betrayal, lust, and power. It began with a masquerade, a night where the court donned masks not only on their faces, but upon their intentions. Queen Alienor was draped in crimson silk that clung to her like a second skin, her golden hair falling over bare shoulders, her crown resting lightly, almost mockingly, on her brow. She moved through the grand hall like a predator among prey, her eyes sharp, her smile sharper. Beneath the glittering chandeliers, servants poured wine, and musicians played tunes that stirred more than just the soul. But Alienor's gaze was fixed on one man, Sir Caelan, a knight whose loyalty to the crown was rivaled only by his dangerous charm. His tunic was dark, his stance defiant, and the scar across his cheek whispered of battles survived, and perhaps hearts broken. Their eyes met across the hall, and in that moment the first thread of treason was spun. What would make a queen risk everything? What desire is so great that even a throne feels like too small a prize? That night, as the castle slept under the watch of stars, Alienor's chambers became the stage for secrets that would outlast empires. The knight entered under the cover of darkness, his boots silent on the cold stone floor. No words were spoken as silk met steel, as longing met recklessness. But what neither knew, what no passion could blind them from forever, was that a single betrayal at this level of power draws watchers, and in the shadows beyond her chamber, a pair of eyes glowed faintly. Someone had seen everything. The queen's pleasures were no longer her own secret. They were a weapon in someone else's hand. And so began the unraveling of the kingdom. By dawn, the queen's chamber was once again a place of cold stone and royal duty. But beyond those heavy wooden doors, the castle had begun to hum, not with music or celebration, but with whispers. A maid had seen a shadow slip from the queen's quarters. A guard had sworn he heard muffled voices where there should have been none. And in the corridors where secrets traveled faster than the wind, a name began to echo. Sir Caelan. What happens when love becomes a liability? When a single glance, a single touch, can tip the scales of power? The king, old, calculating, and far from blind, watched his queen with new suspicion. He had once believed Alienor's beauty was a symbol of his strength. Now he saw it as the greatest threat to his crown. At court, rivals of the queen, ambitious lords and jealous ladies, began to circle like vultures. They spoke of loyalty, of honor, but their eyes burned with hunger for the throne, for the downfall of the woman who held more sway than any of them dared admit. And in the quiet corners of the castle, deals were struck, a coin for a rumor, a promise for a betrayal. Alianor herself felt the walls close in. The same walls that had once protected her now echoed with the sound of her own undoing. Every step she took down the stone corridors felt watched. Every smile she offered felt hollow. But the queen was no innocent damsel. She had not risen to power by chance. If they wanted a battle, she would give them one. How far would you go to protect what is yours? How many would you sacrifice to save your own throne or your own heart? Alienor's next move would be her boldest yet, and it would turn passion into war. The queen's plan is set in motion, but when the first blood is spilled, no one will be safe. Who will betray whom first, and how far will the queen go to keep her secrets buried? The queen knew that whispers alone could destroy her, but only if she let them. So Alienor acted before the storm of rumors could turn into open rebellion. First, she summoned Sir Caelin, not to her chamber but to the royal gardens, where the scent of roses masked the stench of treachery. Beneath the moonlight, among marble statues of forgotten kings, she spoke not of love, but of survival. "Your sword has defended my crown on the battlefield," she said, her voice like a blade sheathed in velvet. "Now, it must defend me in the court." Caelin hesitated. What had begun as passion was now something far darker. Could he kill for her? Could he lie, betray, and spill blood to protect what was never truly his? What would you do if loyalty and love pointed in opposite directions? If protecting one meant destroying the other? Meanwhile, the king's spies worked tirelessly. A letter stolen from Alienor's desk hinted at secret meetings. A bribe delivered to a guard bought a damning testimony. The net tightened, and Alienor could feel it closing around her throat. But Alienor's enemies had made one mistake. They underestimated her hunger for power. That night, during a grand feast meant to honor the king's victories, a goblet of wine found its way to the lips of the king's most trusted advisor, the same man who had promised to expose Alienor's affair. By dawn he was dead, his face twisted in agony, his hands clutching at his throat as if to claw away the poison that ended his life. The court was thrown into chaos. Who could have done this? Why? Alienor played her role to perfection, mourning the loss, condemning the crime, offering gold for answers. But behind her tear-streaked mask, a new plan was taking shape. When the game turns deadly, how far will the queen go to survive? And who will be her next victim or pawn? Caelin, too, began to change. His love became fear. His fear became resolve. He would protect the queen, yes, but at what cost to his soul? A kingdom in mourning, a queen playing both victim and predator. But with every move, the danger grows, and the final betrayal draws closer. The castle's stone walls had witnessed centuries of secrets, but now they seemed to lean inward, listening, as if eager to consume the queen's final confessions. Alienor stood at the highest tower, staring at the endless black of the night sky. The weight of the crown on her head felt heavier than ever, because now it was not just gold. It was guilt. It was danger. It was blood. Below, the court had turned feral. The death of the king's advisor had opened a door that could no longer be shut. Lords gathered in dark corners, their voices lowered but their ambitions high. Every one of them saw opportunity in the chaos. And the king? He watched, he waited. His silence was more terrifying than any outburst. What's more dangerous, a king enraged or a king who smiles as he plots? Caelin felt the queen's grip tighten, not on his arm but on his fate. She needed him now more than ever. A protector, a weapon, but also a witness. And so Alienor made her boldest move yet. She sent Caelin on a mission, to root out the spies, to silence the tongues that wagged too freely, to remind the court that the queen was not to be crossed. Night after night, Caelin became the queen's shadow of death. A whisper here, a blade there. And with every body that fell, the queen's reign seemed safer, yet also closer to collapse. How much blood can one spill before the stain can never be washed clean? But the hunters closed in. A letter smuggled to a foreign duke promised evidence of the queen's sins. A servant, too frightened to keep silent, prepared to confess all. And the king, his trap was nearly ready. The mask of the queen begins to crack, the king makes his move, and the final night of betrayal draws near. The great hall, once a place of feasts and laughter, now echoed with tension. The king, draped in heavy velvet robes, summoned his court. His voice was calm, too calm. He spoke of loyalty, of treason, of justice. And as he spoke, his eyes never left Alinor's. What is more terrifying than a king who knows everything but pretends he knows nothing? The queen met his gaze with a mask of serenity, but inside her heart raced. She knew this was no ordinary speech. This was the opening move of the final game. The king had gathered his pawns, lords eager for favor, spies hungry for gold, servants trembling with secrets. He called for an inquiry, an investigation into the advisor's death, into the whispers of betrayal that haunted the castle walls. Kaelin, hidden in the shadows of the hall, felt his sword hand twitch. He wanted to act, to defend, but how does one strike at smoke? That night, the queen's chamber was not a sanctuary, it was a prison. She paced the cold floor, the stone biting at her bare feet. Letters burned in the fireplace, evidence turned to ash. Coins passed to those whose silence was worth buying. But could loyalty be purchased when survival was at stake? What price would you pay to keep your head on your shoulders? Kaelin returned, blood on his gloves, but his news was grim. The king's net had spread too wide. The queen's allies were few and growing fewer. And yet, Alienor smiled, because in that moment of greatest peril, she found clarity. If the king wanted a game, she would give him an ending no one would forget. The queen's final gambit begins. The night of masks, of poison, of steel. Who will rise? Who will fall? The castle prepared for what was meant to be a celebration, the king's feast to mark a decade on the throne. But beneath the silks and jewels, every guest carried a different purpose, to spy, to betray, to survive. Candles flickered along the walls, casting long shadows that seemed to whisper of doom. The queen entered the hall, a vision of cold beauty, her mask of gold hiding not her face, but her intent. Kaelin stood at her side, his hand never far from his blade, his eyes scanning the room for the danger he could feel but not yet see. Have you ever stood in a room where every smile hides a dagger, where every toast could be your last? The king rose, goblet in hand, his smile wide and warm, but his words sharp as razors. "To my beloved queen," he said, his voice ringing across the hall, "whose loyalty has been the subject of much discussion." A ripple of uneasy laughter. The queen raised her own goblet, matching his smile, matching his game. Then came the moment she had planned for. A servant approached with a tray, wine for the king. A single drop of clear liquid glistened on the rim of the goblet, the queen's final play. But before the king could drink, a voice cut through the hall. "Stop!" All eyes turned. A servant, terrified, desperate, fell to his knees. "My king, forgive me, I can't bear the guilt. The queen, she plotted your death. The poison is in your cup." The hall erupted. Swords drawn, shouts of betrayal. Kaelin stepped forward, ready to defend the queen, but the king's guards moved faster, seizing Alinor's arms, dragging her to the floor. And so the trap closed, not with steel, but with words, the deadliest weapon of all. The queen's hour has come, but in the dark of the dungeon, with the noose prepared, will she fall, or will her legend outlive the king himself? The dungeon walls dripped with moisture, the air thick with rot and despair. Alienor knelt on the cold stone floor, chains biting into her wrists. Above, the dawn broke, her last dawn as queen. What goes through a mind that knows the sun will rise, but not for them? The king stood before her cell, no crown upon his head, only the look of a man who believed he had won. "You had your chance," he said softly, But you chose ambition over loyalty. Alienor raised her head, a smile touching her lips. Even here, at the end, she would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. Ambition, she echoed. No, my king, I chose survival, as did you. The execution was set for the square at noon. The people gathered, hungry for the spectacle, the fall of a queen who had played too dangerous a game. Kaelin watched from the edge of the crowd, his heart torn. He could not save her now, but he could remember. As the noose was placed around her neck, Alienor turned her eyes to the sky. And in that moment the legend was born, not of a queen who failed, but of a queen who dared. The trap had closed, the king remained on his throne, but whispers spread, carried on the wind, beyond the castle walls, of the queen who outwitted lords and lovers, of the woman who nearly toppled a king. And in the shadows of future courts, her name became a warning and an inspiration. What do you think? Did Alienor deserve her fate, or was she the victim of a game no one could win? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget, the past may be gone, but its shadows still haunt us.